Sure.
Hi, Debbie. It's so great to be able to meet you, and I'm super excited for this interview. Can you tell me more about like your STEM journey and what you've done? Like you've done so many incredible things. So yeah.
Well, Lily, it's a pleasure to be on here, and thanks for all you're doing to encourage STEM. I grew up in Indiana where the skies were dark. I love looking up at the night sky, and that visceral feeling of seeing the sort of thing that's behind me has never left. So I just wanted to continue to explore that. So, like you, I was active in science clubs, science fairs in high school. Did summer research, went to Princeton as an astrophysics major. I was actually the first woman to do that. That was almost 50 years ago now. And then I went to Harvard, got my PhD, and took it from there.
That's absolutely incredible. I can't believe that. I am super interested in like astronomy or astrophysics as well. So it's super cool to be able to be talking to a role model like that. That's amazing. I think my first question is, how were you able to achieve the success of receiving your PhD in astronomy on an Amelia Earhart Fellowship? Can you tell me more about that?
So I really wanted to pursue astronomy, and it's one thing to read about it in a book, and it's another thing to actually be doing some experiments yourself. And so science fairs were the way to go for me. So I built a 6-inch telescope when I was your age, ground the mirror, and did got it silvered and all that, and then built a little spectrograph to go with it, looked at stars and could see their spectrum. I attached a camera and took pictures of the moon craters. When I was a little older in high school, I built a radio telescope, which was really just a bunch of bamboo poles stuck together, attached to a shortwave receiver, and I could listen to the mission from the moons of Jupiter as they would go around and interfere with the magnetic field. So that's what got me going. I knew that I really enjoyed research. And then when I went to college, I was involved in research too. So I got summer jobs. I worked at NASA Goddard when I was in high school. I worked at the Naval Research Lab just after I graduated. I had a summer at Kitt Peak National Observatory and at Arecibo Radio Observatory. And so those experiences kept telling me that this is the right path for me. So after college, it was natural that I wanted to continue to do research. So I went on to grad school.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And it's cool that you can like see that path in front of you and things like are working out and you're really good at it. That's amazing. That's so inspiring. Um, for my second question, what made you like really passionate about going to Harvard and to Princeton? Like, what about other colleges? Like, what was super cool about those?
Well, sure. Those are great questions. Of course, there's a million great schools. I really wanted to focus on astronomy from the beginning, and I had read a book on the interstellar medium, the stuff between the stars, written by Lyman Spitzer, who was a professor at Princeton. So I always had my eye on Princeton, and so that was just where I wanted to go. And for graduate school, it was a little more difficult because I really wanted to be where there were observatories. I really like looking at the sky. And so in those days, it was typical to go to a mountaintop, not to sit as I do now at my dining room table and download images from the James Webb Space Telescope or from Hubble. But in those days, you would take photographic plates at the mountain. And so I wanted to be where there were telescopes. And so I actually started graduate school at the University of California at Santa Cruz, where they have big observatories, but life gets in the way sometimes. And my now husband was at Harvard, and I had originally resisted going there at first because I wanted to go to California, but I went back, transferred, and went to Harvard, which was, of course, a great place and a lot of good people. And I love the historical astronomy atmosphere that was at Harvard. So that turned out to be great for me too.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I am super interested in definitely going to an Ivy League college, and so yeah, that's awesome. Great. Um, I think my other question's kind of similar to this. Like, what sparks that passion for astronomy? Probably like being able to build and know more about it, or like, was there someone that sparked that inside of you at all?
It really started when I was in first grade. I remember going outside on a cold winter night with my parents looking up at the sky. And it was really like, and it was that triggered me. And so every time I'm immersed in doing some physics calculation or trying to make a plot or something, sometimes I just go outside and look up again and remember why I'm doing it all, because it's just wanting to know, what is that all about? I'm part of this great thing. And so it's a feeling that is just never left. I'm very interested in lots of sciences, but I can't imagine being anything other than an astronomer. I mean, geology is really cool. I think DNA and all that kind of research is neat. And of course, all that ties into astronomy too, depending on the field you're in, because there's a lot of exoplanet work, trying to understand if there could be other Earths. But for me, it just started with seeing the stars.
That's amazing. Awesome. I love that. I think for my fourth question, I hope I'm saying it right. Is it Maria Michelle? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, this is actually Mariah, like they call the
Oh,
wind Mariah,
Mariah. Okay.
Mariah Mitchell.
Oh,
She was
Mariah.
America's, yeah, Mariah Mitchell. She was America's first woman astronomer. And so there were women in those days. Of course, it was rare in the mid 1800s for women to be very educated at all. But she came from a Quaker family in living on Nantucket, and so she was with a seafaring family. They learned the skies. Anyway, she eventually became America's first professional astronomer, and she was the first professor at Vassar College. And so they have an endowed chair set up in her name. And so I was lucky enough to be given that title when I went there.
That's wonderful. How did you like work up to that? Did it take a lot of work and like
So
hard?
this is another interesting thing. Just as with grad school, it could have been here or there. It happened to be a couple of places. When I was thinking about what my career would look like, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be on a mountaintop. I wanted to observe. And I could do that lots of different places. And it really didn't matter what my job title was, as long as I could do astronomical research. I thought I might end up at NASA. I see you're interested in NASA, and that's exciting. Uh, the Space Telescope Science Institute didn't exist when I was young. That's a relatively new thing in my lifetime. But had it been around when I was your age, I would have probably wanted to go there. They control the James Webb Space Telescope and the Hubble Space Telescope. Kitt Peak National Observatory in Tucson was the biggest observatory when I was growing up. And so I thought it might be nice to be there. And then the 200-inch telescope at Mount Palomar was built. And I ended up being a postdoctoral research fellow there. And so that was awesome. So I wasn't quite sure which of these places I would like to be at if I had my choice. Well, it turns out that my husband's an astronomer too. And again, I got married in graduate school. Afterwards, he was a little bit ahead of me. We needed to have two jobs in astronomy, which is not easy. And so I was apart for a couple of years. He was on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast, California, observing. And then there was an opportunity for me to apply to Vassar. And so looking back, I would have chosen that path because I was there for 37 years, loved teaching, had a lot of great students, but I couldn't have predicted it at the beginning. And so what I always like to say to students is have an idea what you want to do. Like, you want to do astronomy. And there's a whole horizon out there, and there's a whole lot of different places you might end up, and a whole lot of different paths to get there. And if you get to be my age and you look back and you say, yeah, that was a good run, I like that, then you've had a good life. And so I think you need to know sort of generally what you want to do, but not to be tied down to anything too specific, because there are just too many opportunities along the way that you don't know what's going to come along. So you just need to be open to them.
Yeah, that's really good to know, and that's good advice. Thank you for
Sure.
sharing that. Um, I think for my second question is, I mean, sorry, for my fifth question is, what advice do you have for STEM aspirers who are passionate about being just like you? Like, if someone was interested in doing all of the accomplishments that you've done, is there anything you tell them if they're still getting started?
The very first thing is that key word you said, passionate. Be passionate about what you want to do. If you don't have your heart in it, then it's not going to work out, no matter how great you are in a given field. So for me, it had to be astronomy, and that drove me. You have to believe in yourself. You have to just really have confidence that if you set your mind to it, you can do it, because there may be a lot of people along the way who are naysayers and say, well, you really want to be a girl doing science? There aren't too many girls in science, you know, and in my generation, about 10% of the women, 10% of the astronomers are women. So I was surrounded by men, some of whom kind of wondered what I was doing there. And you just have to say, yeah, I want to do this and I can do it. So that's the first thing. Just having a passion for something, and then second, believing that you can do it.
That's wonderful.
And so along the way, so if you want to do astronomy in particular, then what you're doing in high school, the clubs, science fairs, take as much math and physics as you can. Nowadays, with so many different fields tying into astronomy, really, as I mentioned before, chemistry, biology, geology, atmospheric sciences, computer sciences, particularly with all the big surveys and lots of data being generated, all those are going to be important later on in a career in astrophysics. So that's where you start.
Yes, and that's really good to know, like the steps that you need to take to get there in those classes. So thank you for mentioning that.
Sure. Another thing I should say along the way there is you also need to be able to communicate your research. And so writing skills are very important. So a lot of scientists I know think, oh, I got to take an English course. Oh, that's really boring. I enjoy writing, but you need to be able to write, as you do with your blog. You need to be able to communicate. And so having those kind of skills, both speaking and written, are important to cultivate too.
That's good. Thank you for telling me that. You have some really good advice. What was the hardest part of getting to your point of success? Like, and did you ever have like this huge obstacle that maybe it was like hard to get to where you wanted to be?
I'd say that I had life pretty good, but when I look back on it, I think the point at which I felt least confident in myself was when I first arrived at Princeton, because in high school, it can be easy to be top of your class, you're doing great things, you're wonderful, you get to Princeton, for example, and I look around and everyone was just as good, if not better. And so the doubts crept in. And so because I was the first woman astrophysics major at Princeton, I was in a class of all boys. And once in a while, there'd be another girl. There were, in a class of 40 physics majors, there were 2 other girls. In my astronomy classes, I was the only one. So the boys would band together and study together, and I didn't have that support system. And so I didn't think about that at the time, but looking back, I see that that made it a little harder. And again, you just got to keep chugging along and say, oh, okay, I can do this. So I just got to keep going.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to know is that, some girls, I know that I even feel like that in my computer science class. Like,
I bet.
I'm the only girl and there's like one other girl and that's about it and it's all
Yes.
guys. And
Yes.
sometimes I feel like the other boys don't support me. And so that's good to know
Right.
as a girl or a scientist that we can do anything, even though like we may be
Absolutely.
the only girl that's there. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
that's great. Did you have a role model or someone that you looked up to when you were like first starting out? Like, was there like this huge role model who did something really amazing and you're like, wow, I want to be just like that?
Well, there were a lot of people who were important in my life. My first role models were my science teachers in high school. My chemistry teacher who led our science club, Mrs. Opp. I dearly loved her. Mr. Otten was my physics teacher, and both of them really gave me confidence in myself. And so they were the first people outside my family who propelled me. My my physics teacher in college, John Wheeler, who's a person who's synonymous with black holes, was a wonderful mentor in college. There was also a woman named Margaret Burbage, who I didn't know at the time. I met her much later in life. She lived to be 100, died a few years ago, and she was a British astronomer who was using Palomar Observatory and made some great discoveries. And there was a Time magazine article on her when I was in high school. And I clipped out the magazine with her picture and I carried it in my wallet for years because just reading about her was inspirational. in with my generation, 10% of astronomers are women. With her generation, one ahead of me, there were only handfuls of women. The other astronomer of the time that I met when I was a freshman in college was Vera Rubin, and she's synonymous with dark matter discoveries. And I met her several times over the years, and so she was a great role model too.
That's amazing. Yes, that's so wonderful that you got to be able to have those connections with those great role models and people who are discovering dark matter. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And at the time, you meet someone and you don't know that they're going to turn out to be someone really famous. So when I met Vera Rubin, she hadn't done any of these discoveries yet. She was pretty early on in her career. She was just ahead of me. And so then to talk to her in later years, yeah, it all was a beautiful thing, really.
That's amazing. Yeah. Kind of building off of that, like, were these people like your big support system, or did you have like your family or some really close other astronomers? And just kind of, I'm super curious. This is great.
Yeah, it was really my parents. They thought I could do anything, told me I could do anything, and kept reassuring me. And I remember once when I was in elementary school, I wanted to do astronomy. I read a book about a career in astronomy written for kids by a guy who said astronomy is for men. There aren't women in astronomy. I remember going in crying to my parents saying, look at what this book says. And I remember my dad saying, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. So they always really supported me. My sister, my best friend, has always been there for me. And now my husband, throughout, we met when I was at Princeton. And so he's always been right by my side. So
Oh,
it's family first. Certainly friends, certainly teachers, but family first.
exactly. And that's so good to know that like your family or close friends can be there to support you along the way as you go and achieve great things.
It's,
Those
it's
are
really
all,
important.
yeah, those are all the questions I have. If there was anything else you wanted to mention, but I don't know. I don't have anything else to ask. I'm just so inspired. That's all.
Well, thanks, Lily. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I wish you luck with Million Girl space flight crew. Did I get that right? Flight
Yes.
crew. And that's awesome. Thanks for what you're doing, and good luck with your future.
Yes. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.